Well, hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Sweeter After Difficulty podcast. I am Randy Highsmith, super excited to have you here with us today. We have an awesome topic that actually I'm kind of surprised we haven't talked about yet. This is something that is really part of the foundation of the podcast. So excited to have you here. We're going to jump right into that in a second. But first, I want to introduce my guests. Right off the bat, you know him, you love him, regular guest on the show, Chris Anderson. Chris, how's it going today, buddy?
Doing good.
Good, good. And filling our third seat today, we have a new guest for you. I'm so excited to introduce this guy to you. He is a good friend of ours, trains at our gym, an absolute savage. I think he's going to fill that third seat really well. Ian Johnson, everybody. Ian, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for being here. So we have a crazy good topic today. We are going to be talking about suffering. And I know that there's so many avenues that we're going to be able to go with this. And so I started with a quote that I found on suffering, sort of along the lines. And for those of you who don't know, a little inside baseball for you. The name of this podcast, Sweeter After Difficulty, we were just talking about this backstage before we started. And it was very close. Like there was a toss up. I literally almost flipped a coin to decide to go with Sweeter After Difficulty over the other side of suffering, which was a really close runner up, right? So today we're going to be talking about suffering, and I brought a quote about suffering. So check this out. It says, "Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars." And that's by Khalil Gibran, prolific author and poet. Check out some of his other work, really interesting stuff. But really cool quote about suffering today. So I want to jump right into this. You know how we do it. Fellas, when you hear, I want to start by breaking it down like I always do, right? Into the nuts and bolts of this. And the words are what stick out to me. And so obviously suffering going to be the theme today. When you hear the word suffering, what immediately is there an image that immediately pops into your head about that?
Chris, you want to go or
Y-
you want me to start?
Go for it. Give it a
All
shot.
right. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think most of us, when you consider suffering, you consider physical suffering, right? The first thing that comes up to most people is whether it's a hardship or whatever it is. But I think the concept of suffering as a whole is much deeper than that, right? So you can have a hard workout, but a lot of times, at least in my opinion, the real suffering comes from the mental exhaustion that comes in, that part of you that always is yelling at you to quit, give up, give something in, or even just the spiritual part of you that's ready to lay it down at sometimes. And I mean, that's, to me, that is the ultimate, is when those three come together. That's
Yeah.
suffering. And a lot of us take that starting with the physical, but truth be told, I think that's a more holistic thing on the whole.
Yeah, I resonate with that a lot. Like the idea of what your head is telling you to do is usually an indication that you're in some suffering at the moment. Like I'm thinking back to when I had my Shark Tank and about the third or fourth person in, my head was like, you should just quit now. Like there's another 30
Hmm.
people in that line. You should stop. And I was like, this sucks. Like those first 10 people, I was like, this is horrible. I don't want anything to do with this. But people are looking at me, so I guess I got to sit here.
But it's that societal pressure, it's that peer pressure, but it's also just like that's where your mind either hardens or gives up. And I know there's, especially in jujitsu, there's that thing about tapping early, and I do believe for your body that's probably a better concept. But I always also feel like there's an edge that you give up when you just kind of admit that things are, oh, you caught it, good. Being able to actually fight out of things when the chips are stacked as far against you as possible, there's a skill to that, and there's a skill to that, but there's also like a practice that comes to that. And so when you get used to living in those moments and being at the end range and still trying to fight your way out until there is
Oh,
nothing
interesting.
left, I think that's a really valuable skill.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so obviously perfect examples. Let's dive a little deeper though into what it actually is. Like what when you think of suffering now, or to suffer, right? Because suffering is the act of, to suffer. Um, what does it mean to suffer?
I mean, suffering is quite literally just being pushed outside of what where your body is finding like homeostasis, right? Where you're comfortable.
Mm.
When you get pushed out of that into the negative range, that's suffering. When we get pushed into the positive range, that's euphoria, right? And so when you get pushed in those negative ranges of things that you aren't used to or that you don't like to do, that's where growth happens, right?
So fascinating to think about it as a scale that's
Yeah.
that also is on the same like measurement as the good side of things, right?
Huh.
Like if you think of the like balance and harmony or whatever is that center point, and then
Balance in the force.
suffering is one way and euphoria is the other way. Like that's interesting. Like I tend to think of the scales as being completely different, right? Like there's a set scale for suffering of 1 to 10, and there's a set scale of happiness from 1 to 10, or whatever. But having them be actually on one long scale is a really interesting way to think
Yeah.
about things.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about just being like if you're sitting at home and you're watching TV with your family or you're eating food that's just normal run of the mill, right? Like your average, let's call it a 7 day, right? You're getting ready to go on a vacation. What do you feel? You feel euphoria, right? You're getting stoked. You've got a lot of good things ahead. You have to go you have to go to the gym and you know it's going to be a brutal class and you know what's coming, right? Or you're hurt and you know that you've got to go in and train anyway. So what's coming, right? Like there to me this is all just like one thing. You're just moving along that same timeline.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's in that way, the suffering is just something that happens as you go through life, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna happen.
Yeah. And the highs aren't as high without the lows.
Yeah, and especially if you plan vacations like I do, they tend to just be one long busy. Like you
This was
go,
supposed to be fun.
there's no relaxation here. I'm like,
You're like,
come on, we gotta see everything now. Let's go.
right, right.
Yep. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. I think
Um,
for me, like the biggest thing with suffering is that it's living your worst fears or living whatever fear it is in that moment. Like the thing that you were afraid of happening is happening to you and you're sitting in it. Um, and like for me, like we've talked about this on the show before, but like the notion that I'm very non-confrontational just habitually as a part of my character. And so one of my biggest fears is always going to be like people are like, no, you're an idiot. You're wrong. And I'm like, shit, maybe I am. And then like for
Mm,
that brief second, that feels like suffering to me, right? Just because
mm,
in that moment it is all the levels of urgency and discomfort and like pain, I'm like, oh fuck. And then okay, no, you get
mm.
over it. Like you have to also then say like even if you're living in the fear doesn't also mean defeat. Like you're not done. You haven't lost. It's not over. Like to what you were saying, Ian, right? Like
Exactly.
it goes on.
Yep. Yep.
so, yeah, that's so interesting. So I want to dive even a little bit deeper because now what both you guys said, it's sparking all these avenues we could go down. But I want to talk a little bit for a second about intention versus affliction, right? So, because when I think of suffering, and maybe I just have not a right definition of it, which is what I think will be
Mm,
helpful from you guys. But when I think of suffering, it sometimes it's things that I don't have control over being inflicted upon me, and sometimes I feel like I choose to suffer a little bit,
Sure.
right? And so, so when we get into the adding an element of choice, would Ian, in your analogy about the sliding scale, would that um, would that image look like someone looking at themselves sitting in the middle and going, "Okay, I'm just gonna tap it down towards suffering a little bit and see what
Yeah.
happens."
Yeah, because I mean, I think physically most of us don't have that drive to drive yourself with like to the deepest levels of suffering, probably rightly so. Um, It's like a consensual versus non-consensual suffering, right? Like you're choosing to put
Right.
yourself in these awful situations, uh, and but that's to me that's training, right? Like if life is going to be hard for you, and life is going to be hard for most of us, then the best thing you can do is to train yourself to be close to those things, so that when hardship arrives, you're ready for it. But if you've never lived that, if you've lived, we've all been around people that were kind of coddled their whole lives, and then the first time that life hits them in the face, what happens? They fall apart because they don't have that gear. They're completely unaccustomed to it. Um, the like One of the best analogies, one of my old fire captains, and he ended up as the fire chief, said that the goal of our training on the fire ground was that when we got to the fire, it was as close to training as possible.
Mm.
Mm.
Right. So we go out, we do this, they throw we'd start with basics, and then they throw variables, and they throw more variables, so that when time came, as things are evolving really quickly, you're already prepared for it. It's never going to be the same, but at least you have a proxy for it. It's just like what's sparring? Sparring is a proxy for fighting. It's not the same thing, but we're just getting as close as we can while keeping some sort of like safety to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the varying degrees of safety depend
Yeah,
on
yeah, yeah,
who you
So
end up in the room.
it's almost
with.
like you're choosing controllable suffering to experience it and to train with it, so that
yeah.
when the uncontrollable suffering arrives, and you have some degree of preparation.
Yeah, that would be how I view that.
Yeah.
Largely so.
Which is the nature of conditioning, right? It's the nature of
Mhm.
preparing for anything difficult. But you also talked about not just the physical, you also talked about, the spiritual and the emotional and the mental. There's so many different
Yeah.
ways that we can experience suffering. But there's more to this quote, right? Because it talks about scars. To me, uh,
Six
I
big scars.
I have
That's
yes.
exactly what I was going to say.
Which had to have been what drew my wife in, because
Right.
I am
Yeah.
covered in them. But it's funny, we talk about scars all the time. I have a cousin who raced BMX and motocross
Oh,
and stuff when he
jeez.
was younger, and basically from the 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 top of his foot up to about just above his knee, it looks like somebody was just whipping him with a cat of nine tails repeatedly over the course of the years, right? It's just
Yep.
his sharp pedals and the ground and all the and
Right.
breaking things and stuff have hit him so much. His legs are just scars from from the knee down, right? Um, he chose the activity though that caused those, right?
Mhm.
And after the first one that happened, he chose it again and again and again and
Hmm.
again, over the course of years. And because of that, he probably, you remember that scene in Kickboxer when the guy comes in and he's just like kicking the concrete pillar with his shin, you
Yeah.
know? I think he probably could do that. I think my cousin
That's
probably
insane.
would be great
He'd
at
go
Muay.
great into Muay Thai. Yeah.
I think he'd be great at it. And it would be great for him, certainly. Uh, But um, but when we think of how those scars toughen you, right? But then you go back and you go, well, what was it that caused the scars, right? Because you don't get scars without some degree of pain.
Yep.
Do you think that pain avoidance is a disservice that causes us to lose out on some really necessary suffering in life?
Yeah.
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And then I think one of the deepest problems that we have as a society is people coming up in something where life is basically guaranteed, food is guaranteed, sleep is guaranteed, money is guaranteed, right? Like take your average person from America and put them in a third world country and show them what life can be like. One of the best things that happened to me when I was younger was to get to travel to other countries, and you see what those
100%.
things look like. All of a sudden you come back and understand that these are not given to you, right?
Yeah.
Scars, to me, nobody loves having or getting scars, right? Most of it like showing off, like the battle wounds at some point. But
Yeah.
I I've said this before. Like scars are your sign that you didn't live a life boringly lived.
Mhm.
Right.
You had
Right.
experiences. You went out and did things in the world, right? Like the goal, at least to me, is not to get to the finish line in one piece. The goal is to come skidding in with like,
Right. Hunter
oil
S.
leaking
Thompson.
off and stuff. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Hunter S. Thompson and John McAfee, my two
Yes.
idols in life.
Yeah. I think like without the scars, I certainly wouldn't be sitting in this chair. I would have the three of us would have never met.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like I'm very proud of my scars, much to the chagrin of my family, because for some reason they happen relatively frequently to me. So I
Nice.
have uh I have this like uh scar on my eyeball. And there was a time early in my jiu-jitsu career where I almost lost my eye, and now my eye looks like a cat eye. Like I have a vertical pupil,
Oh, what a
and
trip.
it's wild, yeah. And I remember talking to
I'll look
Jordan
for that
about
next
it.
time I mount you.
Right. Well, that happens frequently enough. So it was one of those things where it was like in the first probably 6 weeks after that injury, I was wearing an eye patch. I couldn't be in rooms with bright lights. Like
Mm.
all throughout that 6 weeks, that definitely was suffering. But I also had to change a lot of my behaviors and build habits that just happen naturally. Like I spent a whole less time being on a screen. I was listening to more audiobooks and more podcasts. I was actually
Mhm.
resting and letting my body heal. And when I finally got medical clearance to like, you can open your eye and took off the pressure patch and all that stuff, I saw that like vertical thing and I was like, oh, that's sick. Because now on the other side of it, I'm like, I know what it took to have to like survive that and not let it make me quit. And so I'm
Plus, you
like,
look like a Bond villain now.
yeah, exactly. And I could tell like people cool stories.
Well, and I think that, oh man, there's so much there, right? Because Ian, I could not agree more. I think every human being owes it to their soul to experience what it's like to be in other countries and other parts of the world and see how other people live and see and eat how other people eat and sleep how other people sleep. But I think that that perspective adds. I'm always a different person when I come back from a trip
Totally.
out of the country,
Yeah.
always. Uh, and Chris, a little bit, on that side of it, it kind of it's kind of interesting. And Ian, your examples, I thought it was so crazy how you guys were talking about two different things, and they tied into each other so perfectly. Because we tend to think of scars as being a negative thing, right? The reminder of a pain or something you've come through. And then there's the other perspective where you wear them proudly and you want to show them off to your friends and stuff like that. But it's the concept of definitions is so important to me, which is why we spend so much time breaking down words and and making sure that we're all on the same page about them. Because I think that what we're talking about actually here is collecting experience,
Hmm.
right, in life.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
because the more experiences you have, the more whole of a person you are, right? Or
And the more experience, the more you push the boundaries, right?
right, because you start to find out what's possible,
Hmm.
and to your point, we've talked about it on the show before, but when I came into jujitsu, it was really like a desperation. It was like I'm in such bad shape and I'm so afraid of what's
Hmm.
coming and what every subsequent year looks like for my life on the path I'm traveling. Um, and going into jujitsu, it wasn't like a switch flipped for me where I was suddenly like, and now I love pain and I love suffering and and I love scars,
Right.
like
Right.
I didn't get excited about that.
It's not your
In
identity.
Certainly not. I do not identify with that. But
I like pain.
yeah, yeah. Uh, I was thinking, our other regular guest, Jordan, I was like, man, Ian's such a good fill-in for this because you guys are both in that regard. Yeah. Ian, if you haven't seen, I posted a video not too long ago of Ian snapping a bat, using
Yeah,
just his big lock,
yeah.
just really, really, nightmare fuel. But, but if we think about what a scar is, let's talk about that a little bit, right? Um, you experience a pain or a trauma, whether it's chosen or whether it was an accident or whether it was inflicted, right? You experience it. That trauma causes your body's response to start healing, to start paying attention to it, right?
Mhm.
And then it, in an effort to keep this from happening again, it overproduces and over hardens and over strengthens itself, right?
Mhm.
So you end up in a position ostensibly where the place where you received the wound is now stronger than it was previous to you having done that. When you experience that, and that hardening and that healing has positive benefits, I think that's where the addiction to those things comes in, right? Where you start seeing, I'm not only a little bit stronger, like now I not only have the experience and the scar tissue, my body's not only physically tougher, but I also know in my mind that I
Yeah.
can experience that and come through it, and that it equals me actually being a little bit stronger on the other side of that suffering.
Yeah.
Um, so how did we've been talking about this about a couple of words lately. We talked about ego, and there was another one I can't remember off the top of my head, but we were talking about how these words started getting kind of a bad rap. Um, but Ian, you were talking about something interesting, and it was about like how even a temporary cutoff now in America, certainly, of one of the basic things that we think of. Oh, is it
There's no
maybe
toilet paper. What do we
it
do?
was entitlement. We were talking about
Yeah.
entitlement. It was ego and it was
Entitlement. Yeah, I
entitlement.
remember that bit.
Right? And we were
Yep.
talking about the things that we feel like we're entitled to. And so then you
Yep.
start talking about food and water and clothes and a place to stay and all those things. We think about them in America, and maybe not everywhere. It's a blanket statement. It's not fair, but certainly in a lot of America compared to the rest of the world, um, we've gotten accustomed to these, to just having them, right? It's a thing that we just have. Going without in America typically tends to be a result of, like circumstances or life choices that led you down a path where now it's more difficult to recover those resources, but they're still not out of reach, right? Um, how do you think that ties in to pain aversion?
I think there's got to be a tacit recognition of the ease of life. And you're like, I don't want to risk anything that would cause those things to go away. Right? Like even for folks that like those of us that live in this opulence, for lack of a better word, right? Like I can go to the grocery store and get toilet paper whenever I want. Um, if I've never been to another country and I don't have that additional perspective, like, well, certainly I know that like I've been out of toilet paper once and I need to go to the store to go get some, right? Like I know what it's like to not have it for a brief second. What I don't know is to never have access to it. And
Yeah.
so, for that avoidance perspective, I do think that there is some recognition at like a foundational level that like it could all go away. So let's not fuck that up. Like we're just going to maintain the status quo.
Well, I think that's probably true, but why does that, what sparks that awareness, right? Because it seems like there are people that get that, and there are people that have no concept of that, right? It's like when those things go away
Mhm.
randomly or quickly, they're truly like standing there with like their jaw
Mm.
open, like what just happened? Like this isn't supposed to happen. Um, you know what I mean?
I do,
Oh,
yeah. And
that's.
I think, oh, go ahead, Ian.
I was gonna say it's kind of like the magic spark, right? Like, why do some people get tougher and why do some people fade? when pressure
Right.
mounts, right? It's kind of the same thing, right? The self-awareness is one of the most valuable skills you can have in your entire life, whether that
Absolutely.
is of your faults, of your behavior, of how you perceive things, right? And just being able to take like an outside objective look at things is so valuable because that is what does enable that. Now, how you get somebody to do that, I don't know. I don't know if
I
that's
mean,
an
it
inborn thing.
takes.
I don't know if that's a life event thing or a combination thereof. But that is kind of like the magic pill of life to me is
Right.
the more self-awareness you have and the more introspection you have, the higher value you can live your life.
See, that's kind of where I wanted to go. Like, that's what the scars mean to me. I think, like, more than anything, scars are like proof of perspective, as opposed to just like, I went through pain. It's like, yes, the pain was a consequence, but the true outcome was a differentiated or expanded perspective. And from that perspective, you can then build the skills of introspection and self-awareness.
Sure, but so Chris, you and I have both been around people that have scars, and all they do is talk about the things that happened to them. They didn't actually learn
Yes,
those lessons
yes.
sometimes, right? Like
There's a
why?
like
Why are some
there's a
people this way? So why are some people the other?
I think there's a romance to it, specifically with the scars, right? There's a
Yep.
romance to being able to say like I snapped my leg in 4 places and it was pretty brutal. You're
Yep.
like, okay, but then what? And they're like,
Yeah.
well, no, I mean that was it. Like it was a really bad injury, right? So there's some
Yeah.
people who will get hit in the head or break a leg and not come away with an expanded perspective. And I
Yep.
think like if that's the question that you're asking, like, well, what's the difference between like how does one go from just romanticizing a scar to actually using it as an opportunity to expand your perspective? I think that comes back to being hyper vigilant with your self-awareness. I don't know
And how
necessarily how to
can
create
you
it, but like,
get some yeah, can you get someone to do that, right? Because like
yeah,
the hardship is basically like the kindling for a fire that
yeah,
can
yeah, yeah,
ignite,
yeah, yeah.
but you still need the heat, you still need the friction to do it, and how you get that like magic to make that thing happen, I think is like I don't know if any of us have solved that problem.
Yeah, the personal awareness definitely I mean so important, right? Just awareness in general. But it is interesting because I think about, in some I think that as a culture there's like a real brace for impact
Mm,
sort of mentality. Um and I think of I don't know why I have this image in my head, but there's the idea of shielding yourself, and then have you ever seen one of those like booths at Chuck E. Cheese or something where you get put inside and then a fan starts blowing and like tickets are blowing around and you have to try
Yeah,
to
yeah.
catch as many as you can? Because I think Ian of you or like your kind of personality as like walking into the pain booth and being like, gimme, 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 like
Let's go.
trying to grab as many things as
Yep.
possible.
How much can I take?
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Yep.
How many scars can I collect before you put this, gnarled grizzly corpse into the ground?
Yep.
One day? Um, yeah. So, but I think the brace for impact thing is interesting because it definitely speaks to an awareness of a possibility, right?
Right.
Um, and I've talked about this also before, but before jujitsu, I was very extremely pain averse, right? Especially growing up as a kid, overly cautious. My brother was, jumping his bikes off of ramps and breaking teeth and like he was skateboarding and like
Yeah.
I was doing like the mild safe version of all those things. Like okay, there goes my brother. And he's like shoo, um, and constantly hurting himself. And I taught myself as a kid that I couldn't handle pain, right? That I had a low tolerance, that it was something to be avoided as much as possible.
Huh?
But I learned otherwise as soon as I stepped through the doors, and I learned that wasn't true at all. I have a massive pain tolerance, and probably I haven't found the bottom of it, thank God, um, but I've been in massive amounts of pain, you know, and now I think this is the other part of it, right? So the car accident at 19 destroyed the lower disc, the disc in my lower spine, completely took my left leg out of the equation, and it was constant pain for 20 years. 250 pounds, can't bend down to touch past my knees, like horrible, crippling pain every day. But I didn't choose that, right? That was a car accident, and it had really no benefit for me. It was all negative, except later when I learned to embrace pain, and I learned my actual tolerances, and I learned all of those things. And then I had a frame of reference, right? I had something where I could go, this is what unintentional pain and unintentional suffering looks like. This is what intentional pain and intentional suffering looks like. And because of that, like after I started jujitsu, I haven't had any major body injuries, like knock on wood, obviously, like I haven't had an injury that's taken me out. Like a lot of people, have to take 6 weeks off or, months off at a time, or, to Chris' point, end up with a cat eye on the other side of,
Better knock on wood, man. Like,
I know, seriously. Yeah.
Like when you go out golfing, you're like, man, I haven't hit a bad shot yet. Like, just wait.
But like I've had injuries, but for 8 years, I haven't had anything that came anywhere close to 1 minute of the suffering that I had when I had no control over it. Right. And because of that, I've built scar tissue now over the scar tissue that was causing me the unintended or the unintended pain before. I still have these compensations because of limitations or weaknesses, from the, 30 years of walking around like that, and having, all my strength be in my right leg, and muscle atrophying in my left leg, and like all these things. I still can't completely sit on my heels because of it. There are reminders, but I've managed to put together what I think is a pretty decent game over the last 8 years, working around those things, which is why I think jujitsu is such a beneficial exercise for people. I know that, we say it's for everybody, and then we say it's also not for everybody, but find something like jujitsu that you can enjoy that causes you some discomfort, right? That causes you some intentional pain, some intentional suffering. To Ian's point, I think you used the words, testing the boundaries or finding out, where your boundaries or your limits are. I think that's so important and so crucial for us to do as people. That experience, just like traveling outside and, and walking in someone else's shoes for a little bit. But it takes courage, right? So when you have all this imagery and all these things that you associate with suffering because you've seen it, right? Like we've all seen someone going through something hard or experiencing pain or being in a painful situation that they don't have control over. They can't just flip a switch and come out of it, right?
Yep. Non-consensual suffering.
Non-consensual suffering. Yeah, 100%.
NCS.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's going to be a thing. I can feel it already.
Stickers.
But when you see that and you have any degree of empathy for your fellow human, right, then you also have a tendency to internalize that, right, and put yourself in that situation and go, thank God that's not me, or, whatever. Which is incidentally why I avoid the leg lock game like the plague, right? I've seen people walk away with these, or
unable to walk. Yeah, exactly.
Walk. And I go,
leg that looks like Lombard Street now.
I will never heal. Like, I'm like, man, into my 50s, I will never heal properly from that. I will limp for the rest of my life if one wrong move, So we need to set up some privates, Ian, is my point there.
Right. Deal.
But
I like pain.
Yeah.
And by that he means the pain of trying to teach us two idiots how to actually do leg locks.
Yeah. Wants to remind you that he likes pain in case you forgot.
Right.
Um,
No, I
okay,
mean,
so
being on both sides of that, I think is important too, though, right? Like knowing how to, in, especially like in, let's say in jujitsu, right? Knowing how to inflict pain in a way that it can be a teacher and not an injury is important, right?
yes,
When we put these things on, obviously we all tap to as like a okay, that's enough, but also taking somebody slowly through a range of motion where they can understand that no, your body can go further than you think it can,
yeah,
and now this is the point, and it's uncomfortable, it's not fun,
Yeah.
but there's an importance in being able to both inflict and like withstand on
Yeah,
both sides and know within the ranges.
it's interesting. Like earlier in the show, I talked about like how I'm very conflict averse, and
Mhm.
jujitsu is helping me deal with that. But I think a big thing that I've learned, like hearing you say that, it kind of turned the light on, is like uh, coming into the sport, I didn't want to pursue any attack aggressively. I didn't want to hurt anybody, and now I've
Mhm.
gotten to the point where, as much as it's enjoyable, there's also like a deep like character building element to being able to take somebody to the point where they give up, and then
Yep.
knowing that because you both are agreed in this, sparring or whatever, like that doesn't create the conflict. Like the friction of you wanting to put someone in a choke and them trying to prevent being choked, that's a friction point. That's a conflict.
Mhm.
And at the end of the round, everybody's still best friends and likely better friends from it.
Yep.
And so like that's the biggest thing that I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, it's a great proxy for like my personal situation with it's okay to disagree with people as long as you have that consensual suffering agreement
Yeah.
in place.
right.
The CSA.
Right, exactly.
Oh my God. Yeah. No, that's such a great point. And it's a practice that I've started putting into every week when I come in, when we get new students that come in, right? Is I will grab them when it's time to roll or when, when they're drilling, I'll try to grab them. And the first thing I show them, because they're usually, just lost in the woods, like,
Wrist
what do I
locks.
do with all this? Eyes wide. Yeah, you show them wrist locks, right?
Yeah.
The first thing I usually show them
Cheaters.
is I lay on my back and I have them do their impression of side control, right? And
Yes.
it's nothing, right? It's absolutely nothing. Most of the it's really interesting actually. It teaches me a lot because it shows you how even hesitant people are to have physical contact with another person,
Hmm.
Yeah.
which I think is a really interesting shift that our society has taken. We could probably do a whole episode on that. But they kind of they're kind of slowly lowering themselves down, and then they kind of get their arms in place, and then I'll go, okay, here's a couple of things I want you to do. First things first, I want you to pull me in, right? And then as they do it, I make the appropriate noise, like, oh God, okay. 9 times out of 10, they instantly release the
Hmm.
button,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
They instantly release it. And I go, no, 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 no. Bring it back. Like, I
Yeah.
want you to see what you're capable of. I want you to see what's possible. And then they go through the whole thing and it's like, fine. I'm still laughing and talking with them through it because it's not great. It's, whatever. And then I go, okay, now you jump on your back real quick. Right. And I walk them through the 3 steps that Jordan and Jimmy have taught me about side control. And usually after the first one, you can see them go, oh shit, like, what am I doing? Like, what is this?
Hmm.
And the vice just starts to tighten, right? And they're like, oh my God. And then you feel them go, okay, I just want this to stop. Like, I just want this to stop right now. And then you
Hmm.
release it, because you only give them a second of it. You release it. And you see the expression change to one of sort of horror and amusement and
That's
right
the
like that.
flash of
That's so,
realization
like it's
of
like I
pure
just threw
helplessness.
pure out, right? And I go, okay, now I'm gonna tell you something terrifying. I was giving you about 40 or 50% right there. Like that place that you thought there's no way I can handle this for another second was
Yep.
about half effort, right?
Yep.
But without experiencing that in a live situation with monsters, just absolute monster size humans, or even just small guys that have figured out the pressure game and can really just make you surprisingly miserable, right? Having been through that, cured my claustrophobia.
Ah,
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
it taught me that I actually can sit here with my jaw being cranked and my lungs being compressed for
And
longer than I
I'm
think.
not gonna die.
I'm not going to
yeah.
die, right? I'm not going to
Exposure
die.
therapy.
Yeah.
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 Um,
Yeah.
exposure therapy is a great way to put it,
Yeah.
right? Because I think that can apply to anything, right?
Mhm.
And to your point, the art of choosing suffering is really the art of finding the boundaries of yourself, right? And deciding if those are really the end or not. It's the collection of experience. You can't learn that without experience.
Yep.
You can't,
You can't get it from a textbook.
somebody
Right.
can't tell you, right? Because what do you do when you
You
first
need the scars.
Yep.
start anything new,
Yep.
anything new? Now, in this day and age, we watch a million YouTube videos, right?
Right.
So I watched probably 100 different variations of armbar videos when I first started jujitsu. I use 0 of those. Right.
Mhm.
Like at this point in my game, I don't use them at all. I've developed my own way. I know what the motions are. I get the concept, but I just don't use them. Right.
Yep.
Which is one of the things that makes jujitsu amazing, but it's also really one of the things that makes experience amazing. You're going to receive it where you are. You're going to receive it how you do, based on your past experiences, based off of your openness, based off of your tolerance, based off of your honesty, right? It's going to be different for everybody, which is why jujitsu absolutely is for everyone and absolutely is not for everyone at the same time, right? So I'm curious, Ian, jujitsu is not your first combat sport, right?
Correct.
Or what was how many different types of suffering arts have you dabbled or experienced
That's a loaded question.
Remember, these are consensual or non-consensual.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I played sports growing up, right? Of course, and then largely like not non-contact sports, but less contact. Like I liked baseball, I liked, those things, and then I played hockey, and hockey was the first time that I was like, oh, I like mashing people into the boards. Like this is fun. So I started wrestling in high school as a sophomore. That kind of like laid the foundation for a lot of this, because there's nothing that outside of maybe going through special forces training or something like that. There's no kind of suffering like a wrestling season in America. Like other countries do this a little bit differently, but America is the Dan Gable, like however hard it is, do it harder and do it until you collapse, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, I did that. I've done a form of like old school Japanese jiu-jitsu since I was 16. Took my first trip to Japan when I was 17. And then I started Brazilian jiu-jitsu when I was 27. Because back to the point about like introspection, kind of took a look at myself, and I'd been training all this time. I was the 17-year-old version of myself would whoop my ass right now.
Sure.
Like that's not cool. And so that's what got me into jujitsu, to get in shape, but also just to do something competitive. Like I was at a point in my life where things were tough. And I mean, jujitsu quite literally pulled me back from a cliff in a lot of ways from there. And then from jujitsu, I found sambo, so I started training sambo, and then it's just been sambo and jujitsu ever since. And so it's funny when we talked about like exposure therapy or conditioning yourself in sambo. One of the drills we would do is one person would be on each leg, one person would be on each arm, and the people on each leg are trying to straight ankle lock you, and their goal is to push you just to the limit where you're ready to tap, and then just hold you there and then slowly increase it until you tap and then let off 2% and then put it back on. And you're slowly conditioning your body, but you're also conditioning your mind that you can make it through this, right? And so over the course of months of doing this, you become largely impervious to pain in these attacks. Right now, if somebody can actually break it, that's a different thing. But a lot of people tap because it hurts, they're scared,
Yep.
etc. Right? And so,
It's the
but
fear
that
of
was
the
like a
unknown.
exactly. So that was a foundational thing. You've got somebody on each leg and somebody on each arm trying to pull your arms apart for an arm bar, and somebody on each leg, and you're trying to basically just grit your way through it. So, yeah.
Sounds like what it's like rolling with Jimmy.
I don't know that there's anything
It's
that
one
approximates
person,
rolling with Jimmy.
just one guy threatening all of your limbs at the same
That's
time.
that's
Yeah,
exactly my point.
and laying on you and laughing while he's
Yeah.
doing
Right.
it.
With
That
one
And
was
hand.
then
easy.
the classic, like right after the roll, going, "See how I did that? How I did this to you while you were, completely unable to do anything in return."
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yep.
I saw
Yep.
that. I had
Yep.
front row seats, Jimmy, for 5 straight minutes. So don't worry, I did not miss the. uh, okay, so we talked about suffering. We talked about sort of the value of it as character building or experience building. We talked a little bit about the strength aspect of it. But in terms of how the quote frames it, right? The strongest people are covered with scars. Um, do you think that's true?
The yes, and it's a yes, but being covered in scars doesn't necessarily make you one of the toughest people. Like I think you need the scars to be tough. I don't think that make having the scars makes you tough because again, there's people that uh, essentially pick victimhood as their route through suffering, right?
Mm.
And if you do that, you don't necessarily become tougher. Yes, you've survived it, but you're mentally, most people just kind of end up in a place where they're not able to thrive through it. Being able to actually choose, right? And like David Goggins is probably one of the more famous examples of this. Somebody that like outwardly goes out to figure out how far his limits are into a rather extreme range. Now he's undoubtedly one of the toughest people, but you could take plenty of people and put them through those routines and they'd kind of crumble and they'd probably have the scars and they'd come away from it with a whole different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So in that aspect, because it is an interesting idea. Um,
Like, sorry, I'll just let me add to this. When you were talking about when you were younger that you were pain adverse, right? And you'd convinced yourself that you had a low pain tolerance, right? Like what we tell ourselves is largely how our life plays out.
yes.
Right? And so
Right.
when you take these routes and you have these choices to go left or to go right, the way that you tend to go, unless something pushes you back another direction, determines your path in
100%.
life at that way. And so if you choose to willingly like embrace
Yes.
that and go towards it, then that's one thing. If you continually put yourselves in those situations and then claim that like I don't know why bad things happen to me, that's a different thing.
So that's why like I'm a huge believer in self-talk. I think self-talk is like one of the most
Yeah,
underrated
100%.
tools in anybody's toolbox. But I kind of like I have a similar perspective on it in the sense that like the quote talks specifically about the strongest souls, not like the strongest
Mhm.
physical people or the strongest, emotion. It's like the
Yeah.
soul. And so for me, like in this definition, then the soul is the system that encompasses and then acts upon all of the things that we've been talking about: perspective, uh, depth, self-awareness, integrity, like those things in aggregate are the soul in this in my
Mhm.
like framing of it. And
Okay.
therefore the pursuit of suffering and the scars that that suffering generates increases the strength and depth of your character, of your perspective, of your integrity, of your resilience, of your self awareness, right? Like all of those things. So it's not like the soul is like this floating ghost in the sky kind of a thing. It's
Yep.
a systemic collection of all of those attributes.
So what we're kind of talking about there then is how we handle scars, right? Like
Yeah.
how we choose to how we choose to wear them.
Yeah.
Maybe. Um yeah, it's interesting too, because I think about it a lot. I don't have a tendency to walk out on the corner and be like, "Look at my scars." You know,
Sure.
it's more
Because
like
it's not
how,
just about the romance.
because it's not that, right? It's those are not a those aren't who I am. Those are just an attribute. They're
Hmm.
something that has added to the stew, right?
And the reminders of life experiences, like things that
Uh-huh.
we've been
Yeah.
through.
Which hopefully means that you can look at a scar and go, here's why I'm stronger, you know,
Mhm.
rather than here's why I'm weaker.
Yep.
And then look at other
So,
people's scars and sense what they've gone through and be able to connect with them on that level too.
right. Which is also a place where I think that we have to be really careful and really conscientious, right? Because our perspective being the entire universe, and we are the, you know, the
Right.
king queens sitting on the thrones of that universe. You know, everything revolves around and orbits around us, right? So we have a
I'm an
tendency to,
only child. It absolutely does.
Confirmed.
you know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, but having those you know, having those kind of things be the case, uh there are certainly people who have made their identity the suffering that they've gone through,
Mhm.
right? And that's what gets worn out on their sleeve. And for me, I, it's probably not fair for me to go, well, you shouldn't do that, right? Like
Sure.
you
Yeah.
should you should try to convert that into strength, or you know,
Yeah.
or view it as strength, right? Try to reframe it for someone else. But it seems like if you can figure out a way to look at those scars as something that is an indication of your strength, right? Is an indication of your fortitude or your ability to long suffer, or what, how, you know,
Mhm.
Yep.
whatever that perspective is. I think that that gives you a good chance of improving the quality of your life, and probably being a little bit more open and a little bit more empathetic to other people,
Yeah.
because then you don't have to necessarily understand every aspect of what caused it. You can just relate to the idea of it, right?
Yep.
Break it down into a more simple, it doesn't have to be this crazy concept. We've both gone through something hard and we both understand what it means to come out the other side of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Same.
so how do we, or can we be a positive force for that kind of a movement? Like, what do you think are ways every day that we could impact just even the people around us? Or are there ways that you already put into practice for those kind of things?
I for me, it's two things. It's, I think about my kids a lot, and I want to show them what it's like to fail and how I don't like it and how it makes me feel crappy and like show the suffering side of it, and then show the benefit that comes in the back end of whatever that may be, right? Like a bad example, I wanted to make a new dish for dinner, right? And they see me working in the kitchen and I'm talking to them about what I'm doing and da da da, and it comes out and it just tastes terrible and it's burned and it's awful. And I'm like, I'll let them know, like, well, I definitely am disappointed and I'm sorry and I feel bad about it. And they can tell that it's uncomfortable. Then 2 weeks later, I'm like doing the same dish, the exact same dish. And
Hmm.
I want them to ask me, well, last time we had that sucked. I'm like, you know what? You're right. But I don't want that to be the last flavor that you tasted for this. Like, I want us to try again. So I'm going
Yeah.
to try it again. And if it
Yeah.
sucks,
Yep.
it sucks. But I'm going to try it again the next week after that until it gets good. And
Yeah.
like over time, it's my hope that like that kind of example for them builds a background that says it, it it's not about getting it wrong once. It's not about getting it wrong 100 times. It's about keeping and keeping moving forward to trying it again. Try the next one. Because every time you're gonna get a new scar from it.
Well, and there's varying degrees of scars, right? Like some of them heal to the point where we almost can't even see them anymore,
Sure. Yeah.
right? Some of them are just completely internal. They're invisible, right? Like other people can't see them at all unless you
Right.
say or talk about it or display something that kind of leads people to go, oh, maybe
Yep.
they had something there. Um, Ian, what about you? You get any like specific ideas about places that you can impact or influence change in that?
Yeah, I mean, I, I'll pretty much piggyback off of Chris, and I think the obvious one is kids, right? Because kids are like our direct representations of, but to me, the largest thing we can do is just what we model for the world, right?
Mhm.
Um, I teach my daughter like there are two things that we go over on a pretty regular basis, and number one is that you don't complain because complaining doesn't make it better. If you have to do it, you have to do it. So complaining's never made it better. You've never improved your life. Nothing changes other than you've just put out negativity into the world about it, right? Like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like, neither do I, but we're doing it. So that's what's going to happen. You know what I mean? The second thing is that I tell her we do hard things. I said we do hard things
Yeah.
because not everyone will do hard things. And if
Yep.
you will do hard things, you will accelerate in life.
That's
And you
so
do
funny.
hard things because they're hard.
It's so
Like
funny.
that's it.
I have that exact same phrase with the kids. Like like
Really?
all four of oh yeah, yeah, both kids and my wife, we all say like, this is sucks. And it's like, yeah, but we do hard things, don't we? All
Yep.
right,
That's
dive
it.
in. Like it's
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have this clip somewhere of my daughter when she was, I don't know, she's about 3 or 4. And I was on a like David Goggins kick and she had her little suitcase and she was saying how heavy it was. And I go, hey, who's gonna carry the boats? And she goes, we are. Who's gonna
oh,
carry the
that's so
boats,
cute.
Daddy?
That's so good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so good. Yeah, I've
But
always
but but like just to the larger society, right? Like the way that you present yourself at class, the way you present yourself out in life. When bad things happen, people do see how you react. And the example that you put out to the world is an exact uh representation of how people look at you.
Your
Right.
life
So if you're the guy
philosophy.
that the things happen and they complain and it's hard, and da, 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 and people will always understand that about you, right? But people do tend to admire somebody that bad things happen and they keep trucking forward, right?
yeah,
And you can provide like a little bit of a light that like, yes, this is possible. You can do this. And then, I'm not a real preachy guy. I don't like to come out and try to tell people how to live, but I do appreciate that when people see that sometimes they'll come and be like, man, it seems like you're just going through it. Yeah. And then this is the time to have that same dialogue. Like complaining
Yeah.
about it's not going to make it better. So if it has to happen, it has to happen, man. Just go through. You know what I mean?
it's so funny that you use the word complain because one of the things I have this line from a from a song by Joe Walsh, Life's Been Good, and he says, I can't complain, but sometimes I still do.
Yeah.
And I think that's like I relate to that, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
Look, we
yeah.
all do, right? I mean, it's a thing, but it's how much can you catch yourself and how often, right? That's
yeah,
we all fall down on stuff. I've found myself complaining last night about something and sitting
Right.
there like, did that help it? Did you solve it?
Do you
yeah,
feel better
Then what's
now?
the then
No,
what's the
it's
point?
still there.
Yeah,
Right, right.
absolutely. Like,
yeah.
you want to complain, go into the backyard and yell at the trees. Like it'll have the same result. You know what I mean?
It might even be a little cathartic for you. At least it'd
That's what I was
be.
Yeah.
gonna say. Is like there's definitely a value to venting off the pressure in the system, but it's got to be that recognition that like just complaining about it with inaction still
Doesn't
keeps you
do
in the
anything.
still keeps you in the same
Yeah.
spot.
Well, there was
It's
there was a so I actually the when I say like go yell at the trees, that was actually something I learned. So when I was much younger, I did like some nature survival courses. And one of the stories the teacher told was about his teacher. And he said he came back from school and he was all pissed off. And he came in just ready to like kind of start a fight. And he said, grandfather looked at me and he said, go tell the trees. And what? He said, go tell Trees. And he said, I
Yeah.
sat there for an hour yelling. He said, as I yelled at nature, it felt like I got it off my chest, but also that like the universe listened and
Mm.
I got back what I needed.
I think that's such a great exercise and practice. And I think it ties into, I think it's because it ties into what you were talking earlier about self-talk, right? Chris, we were
Mhm.
talking about you're getting out there and you're hearing your voice say these things. I caught myself doing this, getting into this habit at jujitsu because about 99.9% of the time when I come to a jujitsu class, I feel like just horse crap, right? Like my body is done. I'm tired. I'm beat. I'm hurting. I feel every minute of my age. Um, and I got into this, I got into this habit, not on purpose, um, but where I would get ready to roll with somebody and they would go, oh, here we go. I'm gonna get my ass kicked, for 5 minutes. And I would go, dude,
Probably me.
I go, no, not just you, but I would go, no, 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 this is gonna be one for your ego boost right here. Like you're gonna, and I would say these little things, but then the roll goes normal, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm still I still have my technique. I'm still going to dig deep. I'm still going to put it on. And then I started thinking, well, number one, you're feeding yourself some garbage that isn't true. Right?
Mhm.
Like you may be tired, you may feel old, you may be in hurting in one way or another, but you're still going to go out there and whoop ass because that's why you're here, right? Like that's
Mhm.
that's what you came to do. And the other thing was I started thinking, man, my training partners must think I'm an asshole, because I'm constantly, you know what I mean? I'm constantly going, here's an ego boost. And then I just sit there and smash them for 5 minutes,
I
like that.
I
feel
know you're gonna
I,
have an ego boost. Let's go.
I feel
Oh,
so attacked.
by boost,
5 minutes and
mean
pop
I'm
crucifix.
going to make you want to quit.
Right.
5 minutes. Um, it's, I heard, a Bruce Lee quote once about being careful about the words that you put out because your
Mhm.
words actually have a physical power, right? He said, and I think he was quoted as saying, "That's why they call them spells." Like you say it out loud, you spell it out. Um, your words and the sounds you make have power, just like a kiai in karate or whatever you hear people, like we're taught to breathe out on a movement, or when you're being explosive, there's sounds involved in that. But I think that if the words we use and the words we say out loud are manifestations of the thoughts and the emotions and the feelings, then it's really important that we self-talk, but it's also really important that we are are careful to to do it right,
Mhm.
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
um because you can create your own scars inadvertently just by you know talking to yourself in a way
Yeah.
that's not accurate or honest.
Yeah,
I
I
told
mean,
you.
look, man, not to get super biblical, right? But God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And if you're gonna believe any of that, and you believe that you were made in His image, then the things that you speak into the universe mean something.
For
And so
sure.
the thing that you speak to yourself means something, and the way that you talk to yourself is the only thing that you can control, right? It's how you view yourself and what you say to yourself.
Right.
So there's a lot
I,
of power to how you choose to do those things.
well, you always hear that phrase like "you are what you eat," right? In
Yeah,
terms of like physical health, and it's like you believe what you say. I think is
yeah.
the part of that phrase that needs to be highlighted, right? You believe what you say. It's if you say it over and over and over again, that's going to become your identity. And then when that becomes your identity, that's going to inform your actions. And then those actions create habits. And now you're on a path that is very difficult to get off.
For
Yep.
sure.
Yep. The further you veer on it, the longer it takes to get back.
Oh man, so true. What a great conversation today, Paul. Uh, I knew this was gonna be good. But man, I am absolutely blown away. Thank you both so much for your perspective and for the honest discourse on this. I have absolutely been blown away and blessed by this conversation. Ian, great to have you on the show. I hope this will not be the last time.
Uh,
Fantastic to have your voice.
thank you
Thank
for having me.
Oh,
Thank
absolutely,
you.
Chris, as always.
Yeah.
And for all of you out there listening, thank you so much. Tell us what you think. Drop us some chats in the comment. Let us know what you think about scars and suffering and self-talk and all these things that we talk about. What are you doing to get yourself through those things and turn those suffering experiences into things that build you and make you stronger? Let us know. We'd love to hear how what your things are and put those into practice for ourselves. As always, this has been the Sweeter After Difficulty podcast. We do this every Friday at noon on Spotify and Rumble. Check us out there, like, subscribe, all the things. But mostly, thank you for being here. I hope that these things help you like they help me, and we're gonna keep doing them. We're having fun and we're growing this thing from the ground up. So until next week, thank you and see you out there.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.